The first mistake. The Korthan Empire had fought many wars. They had crushed weak civilizations, enslaved planets, and expanded their rule across the stars. To them, humans were nothing more than an annoyance, a small species that had refused to bow down. And so, when a lone human warship entered a disputed sector of space, the Korthans saw an opportunity. Aboard the Korthan command ship, Admiral Vorik watched the human vessel on the holographic display. It was small compared to his fleet, one ship against 20. The Korthans had destroyed entire planets with less firepower. Vorik sneered. Foolish humans. They have no idea what they've just walked into. Lock weapons, he ordered. We destroy them now. His officers grinned. The battle would be over in seconds. But then, a message came through the comms. A calm human voice spoke. This is Captain Elias Carter of the HFY Revenant. You are entering restricted space. Stand down and leave immediately. The Korthan officers burst into laughter. Vorik smirked. Arrogant little creature, he muttered. He opened a channel and replied, his voice dripping with amusement. Human, you are alone. You have no allies, no fleet. Surrender your ship, and we may let you live. A long pause. Then the human captain spoke again. This is your only chance to leave. Turn back now. The laughter on the Korthan bridge stopped. Something about the human's voice was wrong. Too calm. Too certain. Vorik ignored the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. Fire all weapons. The Korthan fleet unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma torpedoes and laser fire. The space around the human warship burned with deadly energy. Any other ship would have been vaporized instantly. But when the smoke cleared, the Revenant was still there. Untouched. Vorik's eyes widened. What? The ship hadn't used shields. It had moved. Not just dodged, but vanished for a split second, repositioning itself like a ghost. The Korthan gunners scrambled to adjust their aim, but before they could react, the Revenant fired. A single beam of blue energy streaked across space. One of the Korthan destroyers exploded instantly. A ship that size should have taken dozens of shots to break through its defenses, but the human warship had cut through it like it was made of paper. Panic erupted on the Korthan bridge. How did they? What kind of weapons do they have? Vorik clenched his fists. Fire again. Everything we have. Now, the Korthan fleet unleashed another barrage. But the Revenant moved, faster than anything they had ever seen. It weaved through the incoming fire, dodging at impossible speeds. Then it struck back. One shot, one kill. Another Korthan battleship erupted in flames. Then another, and another. Within moments, 5 of Vorik's ships were gone. This wasn't a battle. This was a slaughter. Vorik's hands trembled as he opened a channel. What? What are you? The human captain's voice returned. Cold. Emotionless. You attacked first. Now you will understand why that was your last mistake. For the first time in his life, Admiral Vorik felt fear. Admiral Vorik had never known fear. He had commanded fleets that crushed entire civilizations, wiped out rebellions, and forced countless species into submission. Fear was something lesser beings felt. Not him. But now, as he watched his fleet burn, he felt a cold dread creeping into his bones. The human warship, Revenant, they called it, was like nothing he had ever encountered. It moved through space like a phantom, impossible to track, impossible to hit. Korthan warships were built for overwhelming firepower, designed to win by sheer numbers and brute strength. But against this thing, their numbers meant nothing. Vorik's officers were shouting orders, scanning for weaknesses, trying desperately to make sense of what was happening. There's no way a ship that small has that much firepower, one officer cried. Another was frantically checking the weapon systems. We've lost 5 ships in under a minute. Our targeting systems can't even lock onto them. They're using advanced stealth technology. Someone else yelled. Vorik slammed his fist onto the console. Enough. Find a way to. His words died in his throat as something terrifying appeared on the holoscreen. The Revenant had stopped moving. It was floating silently in space, directly in front of them. It was almost as if it was waiting. And then, their sensors went dark. Every Corthan warship in the fleet lost their targeting systems, their scanners, even their communications. One by one, their screens flickered and turned to static. A young officer's voice trembled as he reported, "Admiral, we're blind. We can't see them anymore." Vork's blood ran cold. The human ship had just disabled their entire fleet sensors. That shouldn't be possible. Before he could react, the human warship moved again. This time, it wasn't dodging. It was hunting. A Corthan cruiser near the edge of the fleet suddenly split in half. No explosion. No warning. Just a clean, precise cut straight through the middle, as if an invisible blade had sliced it apart. A second later, the wreckage detonated, sending burning debris spiraling into the void. The Corthan fleet was in chaos. Some captains, panicked beyond reason, fired blindly in every direction, hoping to hit something. Others tried to run, their engines flaring as they attempted to escape. It didn't matter. One by one, the Revenant destroyed them. A destroyer's bridge was pierced by a beam of energy so precise it killed only the command crew, leaving the rest of the ship adrift in silence. A battleship's weapons were systematically torn apart before the human warship sent a single missile straight into its reactor. No wasted shots, no unnecessary destruction. Every move was surgical, efficient. The Corthans weren't fighting an enemy. They were being dismantled. Vorik gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm. He was still an admiral of the Corthan Empire. He had to think. He opened a secure channel to the remaining ships. Regroup. Do not engage alone. Surround them. Force them into a position where they can't escape. His remaining warships attempted to follow his orders, but the Revenant was faster. Too fast. Within seconds, it was behind them. A low, static-filled hum filled the bridge. The main holoscreen flickered. Then, without warning, the human captain's voice came through. Calm. Unshaken. You should have left when you had the chance. The transmission ended. And then, the Revenant fired. A brilliant streak of energy slammed into the Corthan flagship's side, bypassing its shields entirely. Consoles exploded, smoke filled the bridge, and the lights flickered as the ship's systems failed. Vorik was thrown to the floor. Pain shot through his ribs, but he forced himself to stand. His mind was racing. He had to escape. He had to warn the Empire. But deep down, he already knew the truth. It was too late. Admiral Vorik clutched the edge of his command console, his breathing ragged. His fleet, the mighty Corthan fleet, was in ruins. What had started as a simple ambush had turned into a massacre. And the Revenant, it was untouched. The lone human warship had annihilated his forces with terrifying precision. It moved like a phantom, struck like a predator, and disappeared before they could react. His ships weren't fighting an enemy. They were being hunted. A sudden explosion rocked the flagship, sending Vorik stumbling. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and the acrid smell of burning metal filled the bridge. "Damage report," he barked. An officer, face pale with fear, checked his console. "Direct hit to our port thrusters. Shields are..." "Admiral, we have no shields." Vorik's eyes widened. "What?" "Some kind of weapon. It bypassed our defenses completely. It's like our shields weren't even there." "Impossible." Corthan warships had some of the strongest shields in the galaxy. No species, not even the humans, had weapons powerful enough to ignore them. And yet, the Revenant had done it. The holoscreen flickered, trying to re-establish a connection with the rest of the fleet. What was left of it? The once mighty formation of Corthan warships had been reduced to scattered, burning wreckage. The few survivors were in full retreat, their captains ignoring all orders. Cowards. Vorik ground his teeth. "Tell the remaining ships to regroup." "We are not." The holoscreen suddenly shifted, and a new image appeared. Not a battlefield, not a tactical map. A face, a human face. Captain Elias Carter of the Revenant. He was calm, cold, unshaken. His uniform was clean, untouched by the chaos outside. He stared directly at Vorik, his expression unreadable. And then he spoke. Surrender. One word. A simple command. Vorik felt rage boil inside him. You dare. Carter continued as if he hadn't spoken. Your fleet is destroyed. Your reinforcements will not arrive in time. You have two choices. Surrender now or be erased. Silence filled the bridge. The Corthan officers looked at each other, uncertain. Never in history had a Corthan fleet been so utterly defeated. Never had an admiral been forced to surrender. Vorik's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. You expect me to beg for my life? Carter's expression didn't change. I expect you to make a choice. Quickly, a sudden warning siren blared across the bridge. One of the officers turned in horror. Admiral, they've locked weapons on us again. Vorik knew what that meant. This was it. The humans weren't offering mercy. They were offering an ultimatum. His mind raced. If he surrendered, he would become a disgrace. The Corthan Empire would never forgive him. But if he refused... The ship shook violently. Another impact. More systems failing. The lights flickered, and fire erupted from a control panel. The Revenant wasn't waiting for an answer. It was deciding for him. His vision blurred from the smoke. His officers were shouting, waiting for his orders. But for the first time in his life, Admiral Vorik had nothing to say. Because, deep down, he knew the truth. The Corthan Empire had made a mistake, and it was their last. Admiral Vorik had led fleets across the stars. He had conquered worlds, crushed rebellions, and watched entire species beg for mercy before the Corthan Empire. He had never known defeat, until now. His once mighty fleet had been reduced to debris. The Revenant, the lone human warship, had torn through his forces like a blade through flesh. It moved too fast, struck too precisely. Vorik's ships weren't just losing, they were being erased. And now, his flagship was the next target. The bridge was in chaos. Officers scrambled to put out fires, alarms blared, and damaged screens flickered with useless data. The air stank of burning metal and fear. Vorik gripped the command console, his mind racing. There was no winning this battle, not against that thing. We need to retreat, one of his officers said, voice shaking. Vorik turned sharply. Retreat. The officer hesitated but didn't back down. Admiral, we have no shields. Weapons are failing. We can't fight them. Vorik knew he was right. Staying meant death. But running. The Corthan Empire did not run. Another impact shook the ship. The hull groaned, metal twisting under the force of yet another devastating strike. Then the holoscreen flickered, and the image of the Revenant appeared again. A dark shape against the stars. Silent. Waiting. Vorik's claws curled into a fist. That ship wasn't just a war machine. It was a message. A warning to every species that dared challenge humanity. A new voice interrupted his thoughts. It was the comms officer, pale and shaking. Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from the remaining ships. There. He swallowed hard. They're begging for orders. Vorik's gaze flicked to the holomap. What was left of his fleet, scattered, burning ships, was trying to escape, but the Revenant wasn't letting them. One by one, the fleeing warships were being hunted down. Some captains tried to surrender. Their ships were ignored. Others powered their weapons for a last stand. They were erased in seconds. No mercy, no hesitation. Vorik felt something new, something he had never felt in all his years of war. Helplessness. Admiral. The comms officer's voice broke. They're killing everyone. Vorik clenched his jaw. This wasn't a war. It wasn't even a battle. This was judgment. and the Revenant was the executioner. His mind screamed at him to fight, to die with honor. But instinct, the same instinct that had helped him survive 100 battles, was screaming something else. Run. For the first time in his life, Admiral Vorik made the only decision that mattered. Activate the warp drive, he ordered. The officers hesitated. One of them, a weapons specialist, looked at him in disbelief. Admiral, the Corthan Empire will learn of this battle. Vorik's voice was low, dangerous. But only if I live to tell them. The bridge fell silent. Then the navigation officer nodded, his fingers moving across the console. Warp drive charging. 10 seconds until jump. A lifetime of war told Vorik that turning his back on an enemy was suicide. But this was no ordinary enemy. This was something else. Something worse. The engines roared to life. The ship trembled as it prepared to break through space itself. Vorik watched the holoscreen, heart pounding, waiting for the final blow to come. And then, nothing. No attack. No warning. The Revenant just watched. Like a predator letting its prey escape, the flagship vanished into hyperspace. As the stars blurred into streaks of light, Vorik sank into his chair. He had escaped. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. The humans had allowed him to live. And that terrified him more than anything else. Admiral Vorik had survived. His flagship burst from hyperspace, battered and broken, limping through the void like a wounded beast. Fires still burned in the lower decks, and half the ship's systems were offline. The crew was in shock, their usual discipline shattered by the nightmare they had just escaped. Vorik sat motionless in his command chair. He should have felt relief. He had lived. He had done what was necessary to warn the Empire. But all he felt was dread. Because deep down, he knew the truth. He hadn't escaped. The humans had let him go. The holoscreen flickered, showing a live feed of what remained of his fleet. The handful of ships that had managed to flee were scattered, their hulls scorched, their crews silent. The once mighty Corthan battle fleet, one of the strongest in the Empire, had been reduced to a few crippled survivors. By one ship. One. An officer approached hesitantly, his face still pale. Admiral, we are receiving a high-priority transmission from the Imperial Council. Vorik took a deep breath. Of course, the Empire would want answers. They had sent him to wipe out a human warship, expecting an easy victory. Now, they were seeing the remains of his fleet limping home in disgrace. He nodded. Put it through. The holoscreen shifted. A council chamber appeared, filled with high-ranking Corthan officials. The Supreme Warlord himself sat at the center, his piercing yellow eyes locked onto Vorik. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the Supreme Warlord spoke. Explain. Vorik straightened. He was still an admiral of the Empire. He would not bow. He would not cower. He told them everything. He spoke of the Revenant, of its impossible speed, its devastating weapons, its ability to dismantle an entire fleet without taking a single hit. He described how it had moved through their ranks like a ghost, how it had destroyed their warships with surgical precision. He told them how their weapons had been useless, how their shields had failed, how they had never stood a chance. The council members listened, their faces hard. They did not speak. They did not react. Until Vorik reached the final part of his report. Until he told them the truth. We did not escape, he said, voice low. They let us go. A ripple of unease spread through the council. A murmur of disbelief. The Supreme Warlord leaned forward, his claws tapping against the armrest of his throne. Let you go. His voice was cold. Why would the humans spare you? Vorik's mouth felt dry. To send a message. He turned to the comms officer. Replay the transmission. The officer hesitated, then pressed a button. The bridge speakers crackled. A voice filled the room. The human captain. Calm. Cold. Absolute. This is not a war. This is a warning. Never attack humanity again. Silence. The words hung in the air like a blade at their throats. For the first time, Vorik saw something in the Supreme Warlord's eyes that he had never seen before. Uncertainty. The other council members exchanged uneasy glances. The Korthan Empire had fought countless species. They had crushed entire civilizations beneath their rule. But the humans hadn't fought back in anger. They hadn't retaliated with rage. They had delivered judgment. And now, the Korthans had to make a choice. The Supreme Warlord's voice was quieter this time. Are you certain that it was only one ship? Vorik exhaled slowly. His voice was barely a whisper. One was enough. The council chamber fell into silence once more, because they all knew if the humans had sent only one ship to deal with an entire fleet, what would happen if they ever sent more? The Supreme Warlord did not speak for a long time. The chamber was silent, but the weight of the moment pressed down on everyone inside. Korthan leaders, admirals, and war strategists, beings who had never known fear, now sat frozen, processing the impossible. A lone human warship had torn through one of their strongest battle fleets, not with overwhelming firepower, but with something far worse. Precision. Cold, calculated efficiency. And then they had let the survivors go. Not out of mercy. As a warning, Vorik watched as the Supreme Warlord's claws tapped slowly against the stone armrest of his throne. A quiet, measured rhythm. A rare habit that only surfaced when he was deep in thought. Finally, he spoke. His voice was softer than usual, almost unreadable. Humanity has made a mistake. The other council members straightened, nodding in agreement. Vorik could see it in their eyes. Pride, anger, the refusal to accept defeat. The Korthan Empire did not bow. One of the war strategists, an older general with scars from 100 battles, slammed his fist onto the table. One ship does not make them invincible. They caught us off guard, used tricks, deception. Tricks. Vorik's voice was cold. You call it tricks? The strategist faltered. Vorik took a step forward, his eyes burning with fury. They destroyed us before we even knew what was happening. They moved like ghosts. Their weapons cut through our shields like they weren't even there. And when they could have wiped us all out, they let us live just so we would bring their message back. He scanned the room, his next words sharp like a blade. We have underestimated humanity before. We will not do so again. A heavy silence followed. For the first time, the Korthan Council was faced with a truth they did not want to admit. This was not just another war. This was not another rebellion to be crushed. This was something far worse. Humanity had sent one ship to dismantle a battle fleet, not to conquer, not to threaten, just to show that they could. The Supreme Warlord finally stood, his imposing form casting a long shadow over the chamber. His gaze met Vorik's, unreadable and sharp. What do you propose? Vorik took a slow breath. He had spent every second since his escape thinking about this very question. The answer was clear. We do not retaliate. The war strategist from before scoffed. Cowardice. Vorik's expression did not change. No. Survival. More murmurs spread through the council. Some agreed. Some still wanted revenge. But they were listening now. We cannot fight them as we have fought others, Vorik continued. Our fleets rely on brute force, overwhelming numbers, predictable tactics. Against humanity, those mean nothing. The Supreme Warlord studied him for a moment, then spoke. Then how do we fight them? Vorik's next words sent a chill through the room. We don't. The murmurs stopped. Vorik took another step forward. Humans did not strike out of greed. They did not conquer us. They did not hunt us for sport. They only punished us. His claws tightened into a fist. They are telling us, stay away. A pause. Then, in a lower voice, he said, we should listen. The council chamber was dead silent. For the first time in Korthan history, War was not the answer. For the first time, the great Korthan Empire had encountered something it could not afford to fight. The Supreme Warlord looked at Vorik for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. And that was it. The unspoken decision. The Korthan Empire would never attack humanity again. Not because they were weak, but because they finally understood the cost. The Supreme Warlord's decision sent ripples through the Korthan Empire. The Council did not announce defeat. They did not issue a surrender. To the public, they simply declared that the humans were beneath their concern, that their warships were unworthy of Korthan steel, their planets too insignificant to conquer. But behind closed doors, the truth was known. The Korthan Empire would never wage war against humanity again. And yet, deep in the cold void of space, a single message was sent. A transmission encoded with the highest security clearance. A desperate warning to every Korthan admiral, general, and warlord. Avoid all human territories. Do not engage their fleets. Do not test their patience. It was the closest thing to a surrender the Empire had ever given. And for the first time in history, the Korthans were afraid. Far away on the bridge of the Revenant, Captain Elias Carter watched as his ship glided through the endless black. The battle was over. The Korthans had fled. The message had been delivered. The enemy wouldn't return. Not after what they had seen. Carter exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair as the hum of the ship's engines filled the silence. The crew worked around him, still calm, still precise, just as they had been throughout the battle. The Korthans had never stood a chance. And that was the real secret, wasn't it? It had never been a fair fight. The Revenant was not just a warship. It was something more, something designed for a very specific purpose. Not conquest, not destruction. Deterrence. Humanity had learned long ago that brute force wasn't enough to survive in the galaxy. There would always be empires larger than them, civilizations older, fleets more numerous. But humans were relentless. They adapted. They endured. They won, not through numbers, but through absolute efficiency. And the Revenant. It was proof. One ship, one battle, an entire empire forced to back down. Carter's gaze flicked to the screen in front of him, where a single blinking message awaited, a direct transmission from Earth. He opened it. A simple line of text appeared. Mission complete. Return home. Carter allowed himself a small smile. Another empire had learned the truth. Another species had realized why humanity was left alone. And so, the Revenant turned toward Earth. Its job was done. For now.